Engineer. It was the one challenge that dominated his life. The Mona Lisa was the obsession of Leonardo the painter. Like flight, he constantly returned to it and never stopped trying to perfect it. It's the most famous painting in the world, and there's been endless speculation on the model's identity. But it also demonstrates that with Leonardo, art and science were one. For Leonardo, it was impossible to paint something until he understood how it worked. He had to dissect and study over 18 facial muscles before he could paint the Mona Lisa's famous smile. It is his forensic study of anatomy that makes his paintings unique. His anatomical studies of muscles are so advanced and so accurate, they're still being used today. They inspired this microsurgical robot called the DaVinci system. It's based on the human wrist. It is part of a recent move in science and technology to emulate nature. This trend, known as biomimetics, was begun by Leonardo. He was the first to use nature and man to provide solutions to mechanical problems. Engineer Mark Rosheim finds Leonardo's work inspirational.
When I went to look for good anatomical drawings, I looked to Leonardo because Leonardo drew for the engineer. And when we did a humanoid robot for NASA, I went to Leonardo's chord diagrams to understand how the human shoulder worked.
Mark doesn't just use Leonardo's drawings, he imitates his lateral approach to mechanical problems too. Leonardo was fascinated with taking mechanisms from nature and exploring alternative uses for them.
I think this kind of highlights Leonardo's interest in transferring one motion to another. These pistons move up and down, and you get this very complex, intricate motion as a result from a very simple input. And then from this basis of how human anatomy works, you can get to the modern industrial robots based on a man-machine philosophy. They look like arms, and they have hands that spot weld cars together, for example.
Mark uses Leonardo's anatomical drawings to help him build robots. But Leonardo had thought of this too. 500 years ago, he designed a cable-operated robot. The drawings are incomplete, and many are now missing. But Paolo Galluzzi has spent years putting the jigsaw together, and he's amazed at what he's found.
We have very precise evidence that Leonardo was thinking of creating a mechanical man. And the idea of building a mechanical man means also using machines to repair pieces of the human body with mechanical devices, something which later on we have been able to do, in fact. And it's something of which you can trace many, many examples in Leonardo's notebooks. This was not a very orthodox conception of the biblical creation, saying that man is basically a machine, that you can imitate what is the culmination of God's creation. That would have been very risky. We have a document invoking the intervention of the religious authority to stop him.
Insofar as Leonardo had got excited by the idea that he could actually make a person, the notion would have got a lot of people upset then, not least the establishment. This would very much involve churchmen, so they would express their upset naturally in the form of saying, this is a heresy. They'd probably also say, this is necromancy, because if you can make human beings, that's what necromancers are supposed to be able to do. So I do think that that would be dangerous to him, and particularly in Italy, particularly anywhere near Rome.
Leonardo was in Rome in 1514 and performing dissections in secret. And he was accused of necromancy. It could have meant, at the very least, spending the rest of his life in prison. But Leonardo had influential friends. Even so, the Vatican ordered Leonardo to suspend his anatomical studies. If Leonardo ever completed his studies on anatomy, much of it is lost to us today. It's estimated that only a third to a fifth of his work still survives, and a lot of what does remain was cut up and reordered by later generations. One of the few complete works we have is On the Flight of Birds, a single volume on his most enduring passion, flight. In it, Leonardo details all that he understood about the key principles of aeronautics. He observed that birds distort their wings to steer and use air currents and thermals to glide. Could this contain a clue that would improve the glider's steering? Judy has enlisted the help of aeronautics expert Steve Elkin to see if he can help. And although they're all desperate to fly without guide ropes, there's an ethical issue at stake.
You want it to be able to do a turn.
personally just want to get it off the ropes. I want it to be as close to the Leonardo design as possible. I want to stay with that.
I don't want to risk the one day we've got in going